claiming they've lost control of northern Gaza. Plus,
the enemy is not your priority. That's his priority.
From the war between Israel and Hamas to the fight to survive in Ukraine, we're on the ground as men and women on the front line stress the need for supplies to fight off Russia as Congress wavers on renewed funding. And
I hear that teachers aren't being as supported when it comes to behavior in the classroom. A lot of them are leaving because of the pay.
Amid a public school crisis, we're in Texas for a look at the national teacher shortage and the efforts of one district to recruit and retain teachers as we continue to report on the American classroom. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We're following those stories and much more, including a fatal bus crash in eastern Ohio with students on board. We were on the scene with details. Plus, Congress averts a potential shutdown, for now at least, what's in the short-term funding bill that just passed and the new deadline that's now looming. The chaotic moments on Capitol Hill, the former Speaker of the House getting into a physical altercation with one of his colleagues. And Captain Marvel is back, and this time she's brought some friends along for the ride. We are joined by Zawe Ashton and learn what it's like to enter the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a female villain. But we begin with the Israel-Hamas war and the breaking developments late today. The IDF confirming to ABC News that it is carrying out a targeted operation at the Al-Shifa hospital tonight. This comes as the humanitarian crisis in Gaza only grows worse by the hour. Hospitals like Al-Shifa running out of supplies. Today, rescuers search for victims trapped under buildings following an Israeli airstrike on a refugee camp today. Matt Gutman and our team embedding with the IDF deep inside of Gaza to witness what's happening with their own eyes. Israel claims Hamas is using basements in areas like hospitals to operate and hold hostages. Tonight, officials inside Gaza are pushing back on those claims. But late today, U.S. officials declassified intelligence that they say backs Israel's assertion. Tonight, we're following it all, including massive protests here in the U.S. But we begin in the war zone inside Gaza with our chief national correspondent, Matt Gutman.
Riding in those Jeeps, we drove into Gaza. The roads ground to dust, and all around us, the ruins of Gaza's northern communities. The apocalyptic scenes of apartment complexes shredded by bombs.
There is not a single building that we have seen so far that is unscathed here in northern Gaza.
We were embedded with the Israeli military, which has repeatedly asserted in recent days that Hamas operates bases in tunnels and basements in key civilian infrastructure like hospitals.
This is the hospital.
And now saying they have held hostages there, too. That, says the Israeli military, is the justification for their siege of Gaza City's main hospitals. We wanted to see for ourselves what we could find out. That road leading past what had been a luxury hotel, now charred black, much of it collapsed. Armored vehicles and scores of infantry bearing heavy packs emerging from those clouds of dust. We arrive at this brigade headquarters, then load into a more protected vehicle.
These guys are mounting up. We're going in these Bradleys. Look like Bradleys.
They're called Namir.
They're called Tigers in Hebrew. They're basically tanks without turrets. And they're heavily armored personnel carriers. This is pretty much the safest vehicle you can take inside of Gaza.
It rumbles through Gaza City, which had a population of over 1 million people, but in our 3 hours inside Gaza, we did not see a single civilian. An estimated 1.3 million Gazans fleeing southward through humanitarian quarters.
We're now inside this armored fighting vehicle, and we are going towards the Rantisi Specialized Children's Hospital that has been evacuated.
We unload outside the hospital into active fighting.
Admiral, how are you?
As we met Israel's chief military spokesman, Daniel Hagaria, former naval commando, a tank blasts just ahead.
You can hear the tank.
Moments later, another shell blasted down the street.
Tanks are about 150 meters away from us. Are firing, but we're with the head military spokesperson, who is a former Israeli Navy SEAL. They believe that there are tunnels beneath the hospital right around here at some point, and that's why they have all these bulldozers out here. You can see just the utter devastation around here. Every car destroyed. Almost every single building we see damaged from the fighting here. I've never seen anything like this before.
He shows us a house that he said had belonged to a Hamas commander who was killed.
We're now here in an area between a hospital, a school, and a terrorist house.
And right beside the house, that shack, taking electricity from the solar panels of the Hamas commander's house to these cables and down into the tunnel.
Look at the electricity and look at the cables coming down to the tunnel. This energy goes and this tunnel goes directly to the hospital. We found a door with a robot going down to the location of the hospital. Now we're still researching it.
When we come out, the shooting intensifying.
I don't know if you can hear all that small arms fire in the background. We gotta get down now.
We crouch down.
We hear the whistles from the small arms fire around us. When you hear the whistle in addition to the crack, it means it's very close. We're using the tank as cover right now. That's why it's rolling with us as we're walking slowly towards the hospital itself. Small arms fire from the west of where we are.
Right there in a crater beside the hospital, soldiers prepping to blow up grenades and suicide vests they say they found inside the hospital. Israel says its intelligence shows Hamas has been using Gaza's hospitals as operation and command centers, showing videos like this, claiming it shows a militant near Al-Quds hospital nearby appearing to fire an RPG at an Israeli tank. The Biden administration declassifying U.S. intelligence that it says backs up Israel's claim.
We do have information that Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad uses some hospitals in the Gaza Strip, including the Al-Shifa hospital.
Most of those alleged Hamas operations are below ground. Above it, hospital administrators deny seeing Hamas operatives among them, saying they only see suffering. At Al-Shifa Hospital today, Gaza's largest, doctors telling us the hospital has ceased to function.
We managed to bury around 180 bodies within the hospital.
How many?
180.
You have buried 180 bodies from within the hospital in that mass grave?
Absolutely, yeah.
Last week, Dr. Mohalalati sending us these images of the premature babies taken out of incubators because there was no fuel to run the generators in the hospital. 3 of the 39 infants there have died. A doctor telling ABC News the rest are alive and in good condition. And back with Admiral Hagari, just about a mile north of Al-Shifa, he leads us inside the hospital.
You guys can go ahead.
Through a hole made by an artillery shell. Hagari taking us to what he said had been the children's safe room in the hospital.
Those AK-47s look pretty old and rusty. I mean, was this a crack force that was here?
No, some of the gear was operationally gear, but also some of the terrorists fled away, did not stay here with the hostages. We did not capture here terrorists with hostages. They fled away. They fled away with the hospital, might be with the evacuation that we conducted of the sick people. And again, it shows us the war machine Hamas is conducting from hospitals.
Farther into the dark basement, a separate section. Hagari revealing that chair.
Hagari, what makes you think that this was a spot where somebody was held hostage?
We're going to bring here a forensic team. The only reason I brought you here, and I'm taking a huge risk, because you see the fighting outside.
On the floor, we noticed something.
Tying there,
Yes.
don't touch it, don't touch it.
It looks like there's a lace down there.
There's a lace, probably.
You think that was used to bind a possible hostage?
This is my assumption, because we are now only 4 hours after we entered into this hospital, and a forensic team is on the way here, so we can touch the things, and also the baby bottle, okay, upstairs. But all this basement was disconnected by Hamas from the rest of the hospital. Tying hostages on a chair in his facility in a basement, fighting us for a hospital, using the children here in this hospital, a hospital for children, as a human shield. This is Hamas.
He shows us a bathroom that he says was custom-made for the hostages. Israel's naval commandos had blasted through those doors, revealing a kitchen and this room beyond.
But why do you have curtains in a place there is no windows? Unless you want to make films, to provide someone films of hostages. It says here in Arabic, on the 7th of October, that's the name of the operation that the terrorists made. The 7th Operation Massacre is called the Storm of Al-Aqsa, or the Flood of Al-Aqsa, something like that. That's the name. And then you got a name and a date for each terrorist with his name, conducting a guard list. Everybody has his own shift, a daily shift. And it stops here.
But tonight, the director of the hospital is denying Israel's claim, saying the facility was used for displaced families, not hostages. We called Hagari's people today after our visit to ask if they'd learned more about this place. They had nothing new to share with us.
Got your back.
It is pitch black as we make our way out, nighttime in northern Gaza. And the darkness of this war and the silence of this once busy city enveloping a whole region.
Just gets more dire by the day. Our thanks to Matt Gutman for that report. In recent weeks, growing pro-Palestinian protests have taken place across the U.S., from the thousands who descended onto the nation's capital, marking the White House with red paint, to the crush of protesters who shut down one of the country's largest train stations, being arrested by the dozens. In D.C. today, tens of thousands rallied in a march for Israel, billed as a show of solidarity with the Israeli people, while also calling for an end to anti-Semitic attacks in the U.S. and around the world. Meanwhile, in Israel, the families of those held hostage by Hamas began a 5-day march from Tel Aviv to demand Prime Minister Netanyahu do more to bring the hostages home. ABC senior national correspondent Terry Moran has the latest from Washington.
In the shadow of the U.S. Capitol, the March for Israel demonstration extended far down the National Mall. Thousands gathered in solidarity with Israel. From the stage, families of some of the hostages held by Hamas in Gaza pleading for their safe return. And tonight, word that a possible breakthrough on a deal to release more hostages could come within the next 48 to 72 hours, according to a senior Israeli source. President Biden sounding optimistic.
I've been talking with the people involved every single day. I believe it's going to happen, but I don't want to get into detail.
What's your message for the families?
Hang in there, we're coming.
Here on the Mall, though, it was a time to show strength and pride. This huge crowd stretching almost to the Washington Monument. Thousands of people, the blue and white of the Israeli flag and the red, white, and blue, and the chant going up for the hostages, bring them home. At least 10 Americans are still missing, including 3-year-old Abigail Moor-Edan, who was taken hostage at Kibbutz Kfar Aza. Abigail was still in her father's arms when he was shot dead by terrorists.
Abigail's mother and father were killed that morning.
And she's now alone in Gaza.
She's now alone in Gaza.
Among those American hostages, 23-year-old Hirsch Goldberg Poland, who was taken by Hamas at that music festival. We met his parents 2 days later in Israel. Rachel and Jonathan showing David a picture of their son, huddling with others in a bomb shelter, Hirsch missing part of his arm after terrorists threw a grenade into that shelter, then ordered him into the back of a pickup truck. His parents are left with their son's 2 final text messages saying, "I love you and I'm sorry."
The fact that he didn't just say, "I love you," but that he said, "I'm sorry," I took immediately to be that he knew we were going to be in tremendous pain or worry or crisis, because it made no sense. There's no other reason to say something like that. So that's the last time that we heard from him.
And those 2 words, "I'm sorry."
Yeah. And I keep saying, it's okay.
39 days later, Rachel and Jonathan are living a nightmare, still fighting every way they can for their son.
When you spoke with David, you said you're sending your strength out every day to him.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And it's a mantra I say all day long. I just say, "I love you, stay strong, survive." And I just say it, and then sometimes I do it to myself, because it's so hard. It's not describable. It's not imaginable, even to me, what we're going through. So I have to stay strong, and I have to survive. It's the only way we'll save him.
That mom just doing her best to stay strong. Terry Moran joins us now from Washington. And Terry, some of the families are set to meet with the Biden administration. What's the latest there on how talks for a release of hostages is going?
Well, Lindsay, there will be a meeting between the Biden administration's top hostage negotiator and many of these hostage families, including Hirsch's family. And we're told by them that they feel that the president himself has been personally involved in this, and they're very grateful for that. The secret talks on this hostage deal that has been rumored for a while have been going on for weeks. And we understand that Hamas is demanding a days-long, quote-unquote, ceasefire in exchange for the release of any captives. Israel is saying there's not going to be any deal at all unless dozens of their citizens who are being held hostage can come home. Lindsay?
Terry Moran for us from the nation's capital. Terry, thanks so much. We turn now to the vote to avert a government shutdown before Friday deadline. And tensions were running high on both sides of Capitol Hill today, with former Speaker Kevin McCarthy accused of elbowing one of his rivals who voted him out, and a GOP senator threatening to fight a witness at a hearing. ABC senior congressional correspondent Rachel Scott has the details.
Even with that crucial vote today on whether the government will shut down, Congress instead found itself focused on something else today, the alleged inexcusable behavior of some members.
You know where to find me. Any place, anytime, cowboy.
In a Senate hearing, Republican Mark Wayne Mullen of Oklahoma challenging the president of the Teamsters to a physical fight.
You want to do it now?
I'd love to do it right now.
Well, stand your butt up then.
You stand your butt up. Oh, hold on. No, stop it.
Senator Bernie Sanders immediately calling for order.
Oh, no, sit down. Sit down. Okay. You're a United States Senator. Sit down.
Okay.
Sit down, please.
And in the halls of the Capitol, Congressman Tim Burchett says former Speaker Kevin McCarthy elbowed him in the kidneys today during an interview with NPR. The audio caught on tape.
Oh, what kind of chicken move is that? You're pathetic, man. You're so pathetic.
You know, it was deliberate. It was just a cheap shot by a bully.
Did you elbow him?
Okay, no, I did not elbow him. No, I would not elbow him. I would not hit him in the kidney.
Burchett is one of 8 Republicans who ousted McCarthy after he worked across the aisle to avoid a government shutdown just last month. Tonight, the new Speaker, Mike Johnson, in a major test, faced with similar opposition from his own party. Johnson's bill only passing late today with the help of Democrats, 93 Republicans voting no. But many say it won't cost Johnson his job.
What did you tell those members who call your plan a mistake, who say it's a surrender?
We're not surrendering, we're fighting, but you have to be wise about choosing the fight.
Johnson claiming they are not on the defense here. Rachel Scott joins us now from the Capitol. Rachel, give us the latest on the vote in the House and what happens next.
Well, more Democrats ended up supporting this bill in the House than Republicans. Even so, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson telling us tonight that he is pleased that Congress is on track to avert this government shutdown. The bill now heads over to the Senate, where it is expected to get strong bipartisan support before that Friday deadline. Lindsay.
Oh, some potential good news there. Rachel Scott from the Capitol. Thanks so much, Rachel. Now to the latest on a fiery collision on the highway in eastern Ohio. A semi-truck crashed into the back of a bus on I-70. At least 6 people were killed, 3 of them just teens, more than a dozen injured. The bus was taking students to a conference in Columbus. ABC's Alex Prochet is in Ohio with the details.
Tonight, dramatic new video showing the frantic rescue of high school band students trapped in this fiery, fatal crash just east of Columbus, Ohio. First responders urging passengers to jump out of a window to safety. Seconds later, an explosion.
We have heavy fire on the traffic camera, and we are being advised that there is children trapped on the bus.
Ohio Highway Patrol says around 9 this morning, a semi-truck rear-ended this charter bus carrying 57 people, many of them members of the Tuskegee Valley Marching Band scheduled to perform at an annual school board conference. 5 vehicles were involved in the crash, according to officials. At least 6 people have died, and more than a dozen were injured and rushed to several area hospitals.
This is our worst nightmare.
Chris McNeil was driving his semi-truck along I-70 immediately after the fiery accident and says that this is one of the worst crashes he's ever seen in all his decades working as a trucker.
I saw them. They had a ladder up in one window because there's a couple people exiting from the front of the bus.
Tonight, remnants of that now charred and tattered bus towed away. A team from the MTSB is now on the ground investigating the cause of the deadly accident.
Just terrific. Our thanks to Alex Prochet for that reporting. A new twist now in a murder-for-hire plot. The former mother-in-law of a murdered university professor arrested in Florida, accused of trying to flee the country with a one-way ticket to Vietnam. Her son was convicted of that murder just last week. Here's Victor Kendo with the latest.
Tonight, just 1 week after a Florida dentist was convicted in the murder of an FSU law professor, his mother is now charged in the plot.
Now, you were arrested on a warrant from Leon County, Florida.
Donna Adelson appearing in court today. Authorities say the 73-year-old was arrested overnight at Miami International Airport with a one-way ticket to Vietnam, where there is no extradition treaty with the U.S.
She was apprehended on the jetway. She had literally checked in and was walking into the plane.
Tonight, court documents reveal Adelson made multiple calls to her son Charlie after his guilty verdict, saying she was getting things in order, creating trust, and making sure her grandchildren are taken care of. Prosecutors argue Adelson helped Charlie arrange the murder of her daughter's ex-husband Dan Martell back in July of 2014. The two in the middle of bitter disputes at the time.
Excuse me, Mrs. Adelson?
In this police surveillance video, an undercover FBI agent posing as a relative of one of the hitmen confronts Adelson and demands more money after the murder. Investigators say she later made this call to her son.
Got some paperwork hand-delivered to me.
Does it involve me or other people?
Well, probably both of us.
Victor Kendo joins us now. Victor, where is Donna Adelson now?
Lindsay, she is in custody here in Miami, waiting to be transferred to Tallahassee. Previously, she has denied any involvement in the crime. Lindsay?
Victor Kendo for us. Thanks so much, Victor. A United Airlines flight heading to Canada had to make an emergency landing in the Bay Area due to an alleged bomb threat. Law enforcement sources are saying it was an airdropped threat sent to people on board the flight from LAX to Vancouver. The flight almost made it to Oregon before turning around and landing in San Francisco. Sources say it was determined that the threat was not likely credible, and the FBI is investigating the incident. President Biden and China's President Xi Jinping are set to meet tomorrow in San Francisco on the sidelines of the APEC summit that Xi will be attending. It will be their first face-to-face meeting in a year. ABC News sources are saying expectations for this high-stakes meeting are low, with President Biden saying the goal of the meeting is to get back on a normal course of corresponding. U.S. officials say managing expectations and tensions between the two nations is most important. One priority the president's own officials are stressing is the need to keep funding the country's support of Ukraine as it continues its fight against Russia. With U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan saying, quote, the window is closing on getting aid to Ukraine as soon as possible. That aid gets Ukraine medical supplies, ammunition, and more, which its own soldiers say is necessary to maintain their fight. ABC's Patrick Reevell was on the ground to see what's at stake amid a funding battle being waged right here at home.
The enemy is not your priority. That's his priority.
Це його пріоритет, номер один.
Everybody else, your job is to just not shoot your friend first. Only after you're completely prepared not to shoot your friend is it your turn now to shoot the enemy.
Jackie served 8 years in a U.S. infantry division.
So we're going to just change it a little bit. We're going to be
The
facing,
California native left the military in 2014 and has spent most of the past decade training American special forces at home. But when Russia invaded Ukraine, he traveled there to fight as a volunteer.
I will look at him.
Here, just outside Kyiv, he's now teaching basic training to fresh recruits at the 114th Territorial Defense Brigade. After a summer counteroffensive, Ukraine had hoped could end the war quickly.
The bottom line is we didn't have the equipment to do that. So as disappointing as our results are for the counteroffensive, it wasn't terrible. We punched above our weight. We shouldn't have got as far as we did.
Jackie was wounded fighting for Ukraine, but now there are questions whether the US's own commitment is wavering.
How worried are you that the US is going to withdraw its support?
I'm not too worried that they're going to completely withdraw support. I am worried that they're not going to, because they haven't, frankly, increased the support to a level that will enable us to solve this problem quickly in the right way.
Enough is enough. I'm putting my countrymen first, and I don't think we should send another nickel to Ukraine.
What is it that we are trying to accomplish, and at what cost? I mean, we're going to spend another $100 billion? For what?
Polls show most Americans still support aid to Ukraine, but a recent poll shows the number who believe the US is now giving too much is growing. And Congress is now struggling to pass more funding amid growing resistance led by hardline Republicans and with a new government shutdown looming.
I'm honored to have the support of my colleagues.
New Republican Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, has previously voted against more aid. He halted a Biden administration bill that would have combined $61.4 billion for Ukraine with aid for Israel. Johnson insisting the aid must be separate, recently suggesting that confiscated Russian assets could be used to pay for it.
We're not going to abandon them, but we have a responsibility, a stewardship responsibility over the precious treasure of the American people. And we have to make sure that the White House is providing the people with some accountability for the dollars. And we want to know what the objective there is. What is the end game in Ukraine?
If Congress was not able to pass a bill to extend more Ukrainian aid, what would happen?
It doesn't mean that Russians will proceed. It doesn't mean that Russians will be winning. They don't have capacity to win right now, at least for this kind of period of time. But that means that we will drastically see the amounts of casualties from our side growing.
How quickly would we see shortages of ammunition?
In some cases, talking about months. In some cases, we're talking about weeks.
Really weeks?
Weeks, yeah.
Zahara Nyuk points out most US aid goes back into the American economy, partly as defense contracts to US companies. Russia isn't waiting. It has launched a major new offensive in eastern Ukraine.